Wait, now we're rolling.
Now we're rolling. How's it going, sir?
It's going well. It's going well. I don't have the auto record on when I start Riverside from like my laptop. I only have
Oh,
it
I see.
on when I use the web UI. Did you see I did a massive spam of all of our videos today?
No,
I was
I
just
didn't.
like I'm gonna get them all out because I realized I like missed the videos from from last week, or no, like the week before even. I hadn't even posted those videos, so I was like, oh, like on YouTube, like I'd done nothing.
On YouTube, right. Sorry, wait. I'm just trying to figure out exactly where. Damn, I thought I removed the Zoom meeting from
I
the
see sat in
invite.
Zoom.
I think he might be in Zoom.
We're probably gonna cut this bit anyway. We'll just cut like a little bit.
No, man, good to give people what they want. They want authentic rawness behind
Yeah,
the
dude,
scenes.
Okay, so are you gonna make a jingle?
I'll be making a jingle, yeah.
I think you should make a
Absolutely.
jingle with 11 Labs music. It looks so good.
One thing I learned from making jingles previously with Suno, if you ever go to your girlfriend and say, "Hey babe, I've written a song about you," and then you play a Suno track, it doesn't quite hit the same way.
Did not land. No.
Actually, it landed a little bit. I think her friends loved it.
I'm in the granola office, and on the wall, wait, can you see what that says?
What does that say?
It
No, I
says,
can't
"Welcome
see.
to the vibe coding workshop."
That's cool. Danilo, what's up? How's it going?
What's up, you guys?
Hey, dude, nice to meet
Oh,
you.
I'm so excited for you two to meet some of my favorite people
Yeah.
in the same room.
Wait, sorry, I'm
Virtual room.
getting my situation set up here with Riverside. Is it all good? Is it the audio okay?
Yeah, sounds
You
great.
sound good.
Can you
Sweet.
hear us? Because sometimes
Yes.
we have to change our. Are you on +6, Will, or are you on 0?
I'm on 0.
Nice.
Do you want me
Nice.
to be on something else?
Nah, 0's good. 0's good.
Okay,
It worked
very
last
cool.
time. I've got this
Yeah,
new
it did.
mic. I just copied Will, and now we're like on the same setup. But it still never sounds the same, which is really weird. Will
You do
just
have
has
a
that
tiny
silky
bit of
voice.
echo, actually, Matt.
Do I?
Can you try hitting the echo? There's actually like an echo cancel. Oh no, it can't be changed while recording. Well, we're doing it live. We're doing it live.
Yeah, I'm in an office with very, very hard walls. It's probably the worst place to record something. But, oh well, sorry. I'm not going to chat that much anyway. We want to hear about you, Danilo. So I'm not going to chat that much.
I need to figure out how to do a good intro. Danilo, you're in Brazil at the moment? You're at home?
I am, yeah. I'm home. Yeah.
Okay, nice. That's
I
awesome.
also pulled up like my audio interface, but then I realized I don't have any microphones cable right now. I do have a microphone, but not the cable. So anyway, it's going to be the MacBook microphone.
Or the AirPods ones, probably like not too bad. Okay, so as a bit of like backstory here, yeah, Danilo and I I had the pleasure of working with Danilo, I'll say that much at least, earlier in the year when I was at Zed briefly for a few months, which was super fun. And I think Danilo is just like a super impressive person. The whole Zed team is kind of known for just working incredibly fast. Even though they're working on this like huge Rust code base where you have to like invent all this stuff from scratch because it doesn't exist yet. But I think Danilo in particular is just like such a beast. So I think I've been keen to have him on the pod for a while, and I think it's also your podcast debut, right? This is your
Right.
first podcast.
That's exactly it.
So that's
First
awesome.
time on the
And
cast.
you have a super interesting career, and you, I think, really represent that like new, incredibly rare unicorn breed of like designer and engineer. And I think like that's super cool, and we should talk about that. And then also, one thing that I loved about working together is I feel like we're in this like time of insane hype and like just like so much stuff happening. And I think, did we talk about this last time, Matt, that like, you know, you used to have like, when people wrote a blog post, right, it used to be like, oh, you know, we did this big project at work and here's like 10 lessons learned, and maybe they don't all apply to you, but you know, we've gone through the hard work and here is the distillation of like our migration or whatever the blog post was about. And now you have blog posts that end with just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I don't get what's happening. So we're just in this completely different world. Everyone's shouting. And I think, Danilo, you've always brought a incredible sense of calm to any like conversation or discussion or whatever. So I think that's like really, really cool as well. So anyway, I've been wanting to have you on for a while. Really excited for the chat. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man. This is super awesome. I've been listening to the pod like every single episode that comes out. And I don't know, I feel like these days I'm having to pick like one or two main sources of information for this AI world because everyone is talking about it. And you have like so many levels of quality and also breadth, how much people talk about everything that's coming out. And I think you guys this podcast is like top one or like top three
that's
at
very
least,
kind.
for sure.
I was like, oh my God, your ex-colleagues or like Thorsten's probably going to be like, no, mine is better. Whatever. No, that's really kind.
Yeah, that's very kind of you to say. Are we like? Yeah, I feel like not every episode is a total banger, but I think it's just nice. You know, I think we're going for the genuine vibe. You know, we're just having a chat, catching up, talking about what's on our mind. We don't really have too much of an agenda to push most of the time. Anyway, we're just trying to make sense of all of this, like the rest of everyone. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add from what Will just said, but I'd love to like get like a bit of backstory, dude, because I looked at your profile on Zed and it's like technologies, Next.js, Rust, and it's like, holy shit. they are kind of two ends of a software engineering spectrum, and I just like love to understand a little bit more how that came to be.
Yeah, like how should we start? How did you get into this whole world? Like, what was your first foray into like the web or engineering or design or any of it?
Man, it's crazy. I think I've always used computers. Like computers were always around. I think I had a very particular setup because my mom used to work in advertisement, which meant every couple of years, the agency she used to work for, they switch all of their MacBook computers. And then because of that, every couple of years, she had awesome deals for like very cheap, like Apple machines, which over here were incredibly expensive, but for her, it wasn't that much. So I had like the G3 back home. I had the one where you had like the articulate arm back home. I don't know the model names. I had all of these like Apple computers back home, always exploring. And then at some point, I don't know, kind of grew very socially aware. That's even like a thing, and became interested in like history and anthropology. Went on to study that at university. Midway through the 4-year course, I kind of realized this is not a way to make a proper living. And going like into academia, a bunch of like stuff that I didn't necessarily, vibe with too much. But then like I was always doing design a little bit in the background, like more into the graphic stuff. I've always played music as well. Music and design, they always walk together. So like doing, record covers for friends and like show flyers and stuff like that. And then eventually I realized there is this like segment of design that matches a little bit with this like social, like with this desire to do something that's more social, and that's kind of like UX design, right? Like you need to learn about users, you need to do stuff, and you need to like learn about people and convert that learnings into something that's like technological, you can touch with a piece of technology. And then I went on, that was back in like, I think 2016. And back then over here, there was this big like wave of delivery apps happening. So like people were trying to connect drivers with, restaurants and like shops and whatever. And I was very keen on like, man, working with drivers, they're like, not the most, what's the word, but like the most typical type of B2C user that you would work with. And like not the most also like, flashy type of user, but I was very interested to work with them because it's like usually, less fortunate people. They were doing that for their living. So like, this is a perfect combination of like a social type of problem with design and technology that I want to work with. So I there was a startup over here. They eventually got acquired by maybe the biggest like food delivery service around here, which I think today is within the same corporation that I think Delivery Hero is from as well in Europe. It's all like the same kind of holding. Anyway, like I stayed there for like, I don't know, 3 years, eventually moved on to a similar company over here. And then that was the moment where like eventually I was like, oh, I need to do a little bit more of tech, right? Like because I was doing more traditional product design, research, drawing screens, and then seeing those drawings not be, realized as much as I wanted. And that was the moment. And then at some point I was in this company and they were doing like a big conversion to PWAs. I was like, oh man, this kind of seems a little bit more approachable. And then they were like starting to use like design systems, React component libraries for like rebuilding their whole stack. And that was the moment I was like, okay, this doesn't seem like a huge beast for me, like for a person that doesn't necessarily have a computer science background to try to like learn and, you know, tackle. And that was the moment. And then in that company, they were particularly using Material UI as the library of choice. And I eventually got familiar with Material UI. Eventually Material UI, the company behind Material UI had a design opening. I reached out for them. I was like, oh, I've been using you guys. Like it sounds like a super cool product. And the company that I was at that moment was like a 2,000 people company. And I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I need like tiny teams and the ability to like explore this. And MUI at that point was like 5 people. So that was like, this is perfect. And then I joined MUI and that was kind of like my more concrete and stronger foray into like actually coding. I mean, I had the basics in my head at that point, right? Like I could like write some CSS. I could like navigate the basics of HTML. I knew a little bit about like HTML ARIA roles and attributes and all of that. But it was like when I finally got into MUI, I had to learn way more of the like nitty gritty of at least like the front end technology. And then stayed there for like 3 years or something. Moved on now to Zed.
What year are we at now? What year are we at? Like, how long ago is this?
So MUI is 20. I stayed there until 2024. Joined at 2021, and then jumped over to Zed in 2024 last year. And then it's been almost like a year and a half in Zed. A wild journey of like learning Rust, which I don't at all consider myself an engineer. Like I think there's a lot of space between me and a professional engineer, but I think I'm way more independent than I was like 5 years ago when it comes to building UIs and trying to like realize my vision. And this is something that we could talk along today, because I do feel like with this whole AI thing happening, I think we're coming back to the basics as far as design goes, because designers were always the character in the room that was like responsible for realizing vision. And I think right now, given building UIs and the coding, the technology behind it is less of a problem. Design is becoming way more approachable and concrete to do.
Interesting. That is, oh my God, yeah, there's so much to talk about. Can I just say also, for someone who doesn't consider themselves an engineer, you have 565 pull requests in the Zed repo merged. So that's, if you've been there a year and a half, that's like 1 per day. So that's a pretty good rate, man. Okay. So I'm really keen to ask about Material UI, because I think maybe we talked about the backstory at some point when we last saw each other or whatever, but I find it so interesting because I consider like material design and then the kind of various companies or frameworks that came as part of it very much part of like my kind of upbringing of like making stuff on the web or whatever. Like I used to watch like every Google I/O like religiously when I was like 15, 16. And I still remember exactly like when they announced material design, and previous design language I think was called Holo. And I thought that one was cool as well. But the material design one just looked epic. I was like, oh my God, like it's 3-dimensional. I still remember what the guy was wearing. Like on stage so like I really was really into it. But then when you try to actually use material design in your own product, you kind of didn't have any, like there wasn't, like Google didn't make a library. They just made like a white paper basically of like, here's how to think about depth or whatever, right? And then a couple of like libraries started popping up. Like, I think there was one called Materialize, which we started using a lot. You're both nodding, so maybe, yeah, you use them as well. But then it felt like kind of Material UI emerged as kind of like the main, like, serious player. Like the Materialize thing was a bit more, if you needed something like quick and dirty, like a script kiddie kind of thing. And the Material UI was like more the serious version. And I assume one of the key things about Material UI was that it was integrated into the React components as well, right? So it wasn't just styles, it was functionality as well. It was state as well.
Yeah, I think that the main thing it was React, because like we're talking like I think 2014 or 2015 when material design first came out. And that was like exactly when React first came out as well, like
Right.
in its glory, right? I think it was being worked in Facebook, I think a little bit prior than that, maybe 2013 or something like that. But my memory, like I recall React like strongly coming out in sometime like in 2014 and 2015. And I think the very first material design implementation was like, I mean, I think Flutter or Android Studio. If you were doing Android apps, you had a little bit more of building blocks for material design building blocks than on the web, because that makes total sense, right? Like Android development was the main channel in which material design got distributed. But then I think like the very, very first web implementation was a Vue library, if I am not mistaken. I don't know exactly.
Vue as in the
Then-
React competitor?
Yeah.
Got it.
Or like Vue or Angular. And maybe Angular would make more sense, right? Because it's a Google thing. But then like, yeah, these guys like independently, like completely separate from Google, they were like at the right time, at the right moment. They implemented the, arguably the best design system ever to be documented, maybe to this day, at that point in the UI framework that was like, at the top of the charts. And that was like the perfect combination. And I think, yeah, maybe a lot of people used it. I think MUI as the company, it leveraged a lot from the confusion of like people thought it was a Google thing. And if you really think about it, like React and Google, they never really like, there was always a
Right.
little bit of friction there, like React to Facebook
Yep.
thing. And then Google was trying to push like Angular. And then at some point, I think Google was trying to promote a web components implementation of material design, but that never took off.
And then there was
like
this thing called
Material UI
Polymer.
just-
Is
Right.
that the web components implementation, or is that something else entirely? Like, I never understood Polymer.
I think it's something else entirely. They had like a material
Okay.
web library that they were trying to like push forward, but I don't think that they
Interesting. Okay, so you ended up spending like kind of around 3 years at Material UI. Yeah, what was that? Sounds like it might have been quite like a transformative role. Like, and by the way, I love that whole like UX is like technology and like anthropology, or like people and social and technology. I've never thought about it that way. I think it's a very, very cool like entry into like this whole world. But do you feel like you got kind of to do some of that at Material UI, like the how do people like think, what's like or maybe like it's worth talking about like what were you doing at Material UI, like what was your job there?
Yeah, I actually feel like back at MUI, I did way less of this anthropology, like this. I don't know, like when I was thinking about like anthropology, it was really just about like going out to a certain type of population and doing a lot of research, talking to people, documenting, trying to like, really figure out how they behave, like what are the, the components that influence I don't know, their life as a whole, like what are things that make them input a certain meaning into things. And when I was working at like delivery type companies, having to like talk to drivers in the streets and like understand like what is their motivation to use app A versus app B, that was a little bit more like anthropology-y, and that was good. But moving on to MUI, that was way more like, understanding the smallest things at which developers would get crazy, and then trying to convert that into like, and it was very different because back then I was doing like more traditional product design, as in the output of my work was like an app that people would touch and like, or use or click. And then at MUI, it was all code, right? Like we were shipping like UIs, but the UIs were serving as an example to the code, right? So like it was way more about like APIs and how we were like developer experience, like essentially, right? So when I joined, like the team was very, very small. And like, I think there was half of my contribution coming from like gigantic companies was like trying to put a little bit more of structure into the team of like, okay, we need to have goals, guys. Like we're just like working without any sort of like, we're not, what are we trying to hit in the next 6 months? And then when they were like kind of like looming a V5 version of the library at that point. It would mean like a big change when it comes to like styling components, because they were moving out of, I think, JSS to styled components and then using like emotion as a dependency, all of that. But then,
Wow, I haven't
like,
heard these terms in years. Yeah.
I remember this stuff. I remember Sunil chatting to me about this stuff. He was like, the hate that was going around at this moment in time in the JavaScript ecosystem.
huh?
So you must have got to have seen some of that, like toxicity where people were screaming.
Yeah, I think that was like one of the main takeaways, I think, like for my whole experience of this world. To some extent, still like over here over Z, I feel like there is this spirit in tech, I feel like, where people are trying to like, what's the expression people say, like it's a zero sum game or something like that. I don't know. There is this spirit of like people trying to win ultimately a certain space, right? And when it comes, for example, styling in CSS, there are so many ways that you could do things. And there was all these like debates around like, what is the best way? But they all had different trade-offs and, solutions and problems. And then I think people never really got comfortable with the idea that like for certain type of people, this is good. For another type of people, this is not good.
That
like,
makes sense.
and that was like a big realization for me coming to like this more
Right.
technological world, because in design, I think that the thing that's most talked about in design is that anyone can be a designer because it's so subjective, right? Like at a certain point, it comes down to like your opinions or like your own intuition. And then whenever I was around designers, like peers talking about technology, they were always like, oh, but being an engineer is so much easier because you have like an objectively clear way or like correct way to do things and incorrect way to build things. I was like, yeah, maybe like engineers' lives, it's definitely easier. And then when I started to like be more around that space, I was like, there's no objectivity at all. It's exactly the same.
That's really interesting to get that perspective. I'd love
Matt,
to.
did you ever? Oh, no, sorry, you
Go on.
go. You go.
No, I mean, I was going to ask, I'd love to hear about your design process because I've used Zed. I love how it looks. It is really stunning. And I just wonder, how has your process changed throughout the years? Has it changed with the advent? Like, do you do any type of mock-up before you like build it? Or do you just like, oh, whack out some new CSS, press compile and like let Rust do its thing for a bit and then look at it? How does that process go? Like, has AI changed it at all?
It has definitely changed because of AI in terms of like how much I can convey a certain vision, right? Like, or how high in fidelity I can prototype something. But it like these things are very contextual, right? So like if for example, when it comes to the AI part of Zed, right? So Zed has like collaboration built into the product. And obviously we're trying to like figure out ways that we can merge these worlds, right? So like Zed has this big like belief in pair programming and sharing code together with people and doing synchronous coding. Obviously, it doesn't like enforce this super strongly. If you don't want to pair program, that's totally fine. But like if you do happen to be with someone else, the same code base, working together, following each other, like typing at the same line, all of these things you can do. And it's a natural jump for you to reflect on how could AI be in the mix, right? Like we have this on-demand, quiet engineer, like, intern that accepts everything that I'll say, and it'll do like sometimes very high quality code, like way more than an intern would do. But I want to like be able to do something else at the same time. So when it comes to that, I think the design process, like trying to figure out ways that we could merge this world the design process looks a little bit more traditional, as in, we are going to like, we'll discuss first, like what's the vision of what we want to do. And then we'll prototype a lot. Right. And then I think my design process has been ultimately a lot of prototyping, but when it's a more like, I don't know, tactile problem, like more direct, more obvious, like with Zed, for example, like code editors, right? Like we have so many code editors out there. And then there are a bunch of like surface areas in Zed where we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can look at how like maybe VS Code is doing, or like how Sublime did it, or like any one of these other editors, take inspiration, like do exactly how they did it, and then just like look and reflect, is there anything that we can improve? And if there is, like we'll do it directly at the spot, as opposed to like doing this like super high fidelity prototypes. But
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers, but it really depends.
No, it does. It does. And prototyping, like, does that involve you pulling like a certain section of the code base, maybe a particular components, and playing with them in something like Storybook? Or is that like, is that even possible with the Z code base? Or is that very AI native almost now, and you have loads of mockups in V0 or another one of those type of tools? Or is it by hand?
So
Like,
for
or
Z
none of the
specifically,
above?
it's kind of like all of the above, but like for Z specifically, we have a Z prototyping repo, which is like we recreated Z in React. When we first did it, it's like a Tari app, because we were like, oh, maybe, you know, we could use part of the actual Rust code base of Z in Tari and like integrate them a little bit more. But the reality is that we don't use it at all. It's just like a dumb recreation of Z so that we can play around with UI. And then instead of doing like, you know, a bunch of like spaghetti prototypes in Figma where you need to wire a bunch of images, we do it in React, because like if we want to, you know, for example, I was doing this last week. We have like a pane, and then you have a selector on that pane. And then if you if you choose a different option in that selector, changes something else in a different part of the app. All of these things you can hook up way easier with like context in React and state in React. So it's just much easier to prototype right now with, you know, and I was doing stuff with like text selection, right? Which is such a like horrible experience to like code by hand. And these are all things that you can cheaply ask the AI. And I'm saving like each one of these iterations in a different branch, so I can have like shareable links for each branch that would kind of like act as different screens in Figma that I can share with people and say like, oh, in this link, there is a certain take, like in that other link, there's a different spin for this thing. And then these are all like AI supported, but this is very particular to Z. Like we have this, because the main problem when I joined Z, and one of the main problems when I was chatting with Nathan about like building UIs in Z is that it was just like very, very slow. At this point, GPUI.
And this is slow. This is slow because you have to compile a Rust code base. Just for people that aren't familiar. Okay.
Yeah. You go through the whole thing. And it's also like just slower if you want to do like, if you don't want to necessarily hook up a bunch of like external state. You just want to like really mock things up without necessarily wiring all of the different, you know, entities and threads.
So you're using React. You're building like a mock-up application in React, as some people would use Figma. Like you're a fully no Figma shop, or that you use them depending on the time of day or like the feature. Is it like fully no Figma?
You know, for me, it's been mostly no Figma for the past like year and a half. But just because I don't know, like I've grown very comfortable with like divs and Tailwind. I think it can move. That's
actually amazing. So I'm imagining your design process as my incredible process of actually, your design process is what I call building.
Yeah, you know, like the one thing, so like we have a marketing site for Z, obviously, right? Like Z.dev, and that's like a standalone repo. And then whenever people like had to do something on the site, they were always like, oh, I'm sorry, like, but can you help me with this like site thing? I'm like, no, I mean, it's totally fine for me, because whenever I come back to the web where I can use like usual regular divs in Tailwind, this is such like a coming back home feeling. Like it's so comfortable and easy. I can like press Command S and then the thing hot reloads and it's just there and I can see it, and I can like Command Shift I and open up the inspector and see what's going on. Like all of these things we don't have in the Z code base. I mean, we're getting there, right? Like I think 2 months ago, I think when Rust Week was going on, happened 2 months ago, we had like a hackathon and we built like the very first version of a GPUI inspector in Z. So like if you have a dev build in, you can do like shift command I. It's very bare bones, but like it's cool. It's there. Like it's a first step. So like we're cool. Slowly but surely building some of these like UI building tools in GPUI, but still not the web.
How do you debug Z then? Is it like you literally put print statements like in random, like how, say you had a failing request to your, to a backend or something, or a button was pressing and the next state wasn't loading. How would you debug that?
I mean, right now we have a debugger. So some people use that. like, which is a
Okay.
more traditional process. But like I've grown for UI debugging. Like if something is not happening, I'm just like doing the good old CSS debugging strategy of like background red, background pink. And then if it's something more stateful, like it's just print statements and stuff like that.
Wow.
But I've been trying to like, I don't know, grow more comfortable with our debugger. So like it can,
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's like the whole spirit of Zet, right? Like and that's
You're
been, I
building
think,
your
like
own
this,
tools. You're
yeah,
building your own tools, like actually artisans of your own craft. It's
yeah.
lovely.
And that's been like really my first true experience of like being able to do that because, I was talking about like the period of my life where I used to work with drivers and stuff like that. I wasn't doing like delivery. So like I did a few, but like so that wasn't my main day to day. So like I had to do way more research to understand what were the problems and how to solve stuff. With MUI, I was a little bit more in this camp of like I used to use the library, so like I knew a little bit more, but because I was in the company, I wasn't building that many like as many UIs as I would if I were in a traditional company. But now with Zed, and like to come back to the design process question, like um, we don't sometimes we don't even really need a lot of process because we're using the thing every single day. So we kind of like because the process is usually like most of the time just to like uncover these problems and to understand the problems. But if we're being faced with these problems every single day as we use them, I think it's just a matter of like, okay, what it is the solution, how we'll solve it, right? So like you're skipping a bunch of the more maybe traditional UX part of the work and going straight into the like, okay, solution time, prototyping time. And then
That's awesome.
that's
Still
been
can't,
Zed, yeah.
I still can't get over that your prototyping is just writing React.
Yeah, isn't that wild? And can I just say also, I remember when we were working together on this stuff, someone would have like an idea and like say, oh, maybe we could do it like this or whatever. And then before you knew it, like the next day, it was already built in the like React prototype, and Danilo had like already made it like in this like Z prototyping repo. And then it's just if you're an engineer implementing this, you can just like look at that, like trigger the interaction, like it's fully like a stateful thing. This was when we were building like the agent panel, and there was like so many little menus and like configure the MCP server and like all of this kind of stuff, right? And yeah. I think Danilo was iterating on that. I should check how many pull requests went into that repo. But yeah, you were iterating on that so quickly. And yeah, it's funny because I think for those of us just working in React or working on some web thing, that is just the building, and for you, it's the prototyping. I wonder also, like, so because it's interesting, right? Part of how the design or the CSS, I guess, inside of Zed works, it's kind of like tailwindy, right? So like you have like PX0, PX2, you have like all these class names like inside. And like, do you think that because the kind of feedback cycle is a bit longer due to the Rust compile step, that you can now just like imagine what like a bit of like tailwind-ish classes will actually look like, and that's also what helps you build the prototype so quickly?
Yeah, for sure. I think like
That's amazing.
the thing that kind of like changed everything for me was when I truly, I think, internalized, and this is super basic, but like when I truly internalized the box model, like when you truly like deeply internalize that, like regardless if it's like on the Tailwind inspired GPUI code or like if it's in actual HTML like in Tailwind, you can visualize these things a lot more and like be able to just, imagine like the level of nesting of containers that you need to have in certain like in order to pull up a certain layout. But yeah, like
That's
that helps a ton. And I'm
Yeah.
very lucky though, because like Nate, Zed's first designer, he was not only the first designer at the company, but also the first employee. So like when he first joined, I think back in 2021, GPUI was like in its initial version, and it was much, much, much harder to build with. And then the jump from version 1 to version 2, I think it was when they introduced like the Tailwind utilities, and that became way more approachable. And now we're jumping a third chasm, which is like building like almost React-y state hooks that we can use in GPUI.
Damn.
So it's becoming just like easier and easier. And obviously, like when I joined Zed, like they gave me these like, super powerful M3 MacBook with these are all like, tools to reduce like the complexity of building with Rust. But it's getting there, and yeah, like I don't know. I have a lot of stuff to learn in terms of the main thing that that makes me sad sometimes to work too much in GPUI is that I lose the many beautiful things happening in CSS because I'm not having to build a lot of stuff in CSS. But it's becoming just easier to build stuff in the actual web and in GPUI as well.
So that's awesome.
So do you think, so I'm assuming at the moment Zed is one of the only like consumers of GPUI, but is it the plan in the future that for other applications to consume it? Like for instance, if you were going to make a very performant terminal, would you use GPUI or would that be like a really bad fit?
Yeah, for terminals specifically, that's a good question. I don't know. Like we haven't built our own terminal. I think we use Alacrity like in the background. But I think like ultimately and broadly speaking, I think at some point it will make sense to like, make GPUI a general purpose library that people, I mean, there are people already doing that, right? And then some of the very low level primitives that we rely on GPUI, some of them are built by people in the community that are building like different apps with GPUI, like dashboard monitoring and like charts and stuff like that. And, for example, we have a super horrible and nasty bug with like border clipping in GPUI. So like if you have a container, you put in a background color and then you put in a border and then you slap in an overflow property there. Like we don't clip the border, like the background leaks out of the container, which is like, and the fix for that is the guys from this, like, I think Chinese shop that they built stuff with GPUI on their end and they're helping us to fix that. But I think for this state of the company, like that would just like slow us down significantly now, because I think another thing that's part of the Zed culture is just like, if we need to tear something down entirely today and rebuild it from scratch in the next like 7 days, we'll do that, right? Like people are not afraid of refactoring things and, throwing code out of the window and then redoing things again. And all of the GPUI versions happened in this spirit. Like, oh, there's something that's deeply bothering me. Let's rewrite the whole framework in like a, a Zed meetup or something like that. So if that was a general purpose library and we were doing this thing like very frequently, people would be
you
like
couldn't
incredibly
support that for people. Yeah. No, I think I've read some of your blog posts or some of the Zed blog posts where it's like, and this is why we decided to start again from scratch. I'm just like, okay. it's really
I'm keen
amazing.
to talk about AI a little bit, and especially like again curious about your workflow. I think with AI, so like you're a guy who gets a lot of shit done every day. How do you think about like AI enhancing your workflow, or maybe even agents? Like, do you use stuff like V0 at all? Like, to what extent like is like kind of agentic tooling helpful to navigate the like Zed code base? Like curious about like everything that kind of works for you, and especially also what like you've tried that hasn't worked.
It's been a while since I've last used like V0, for example, and I've been trying to like here and there. I've been using all of the tools available. So like a little bit of cursor here, a little bit of windsurf there, a little bit of emp there. Like I've been trying to be around and just like make sure I know what other people are doing. And it's funny because like I haven't used AI too much to like understand a big code base yet, because that is one of the benefits of pairing in Zed in particular, because whenever I need to get more comfortable with a different area of the code base, pairing helps more than like, asking broad questions with AI. And I think that has been also like a general convergence point of the developer community when it comes to using AI. I think like, if you're super specific, you get way better results than if you're like, I don't know, you're asking open-ended questions. So I haven't used to that end too much, but I've been using it a ton to like help me either with like very, tedious tests, which is probably the most common basic use case, but also with like more refactoring type of tasks. And right now, I think that the thing that I've been trying to do a little bit more is parallelizing tests, just like stress these agents a little bit more. So like if, for example, I've been trying to refactor some of our UI components in Z, and that means sometimes standardizing their APIs, just making sure, for example, like a bunch of them, they surface like a style method that you can customize. Some of them like have different values under this like enums, or they like use different terminologies. I don't know, like they're a little bit spread out here and there. And this is like the perfect type of task that I would like,
Yeah.
make the banner and the call out components consistent. And then like AI will,
Right.
skim through all of them and make sure that the API is consistent, and I'll just like analyze it. But yeah, I don't know, like to some extent, I feel like my AI use is very basic too. Like I'm not using any crazy MCP servers. I was exploring a little bit of, Dagger's container use last month because we were chatting with them, and then we published an MCP server for their thing, which is pretty cool. Like you can have, isolated agents and containerize and do all of that. But I haven't really used it too much.
So the idea is like you can like sandbox and like your agent, and the agent can run code like in a container, and it's
Yeah,
much more secure.
we had Solomon demo days in San Francisco. It was so cool. Like the tool they're building is really nice.
It's awesome.
So I saw your blog. I don't want to jump across, but I'm really interested about the parallelizing thing. Like coming from a design perspective and trying to craft a user experience. I wonder if you've heard of tools like Vibe Kanban, where people are trying to create a Kanban board that each individual task is represented by a task on the Kanban board, and an agent, it splits like the work tree for each individual task, and you have like these separate agents that can all work in parallel. I just feel like Zed, with the collaboration aspect of it, there's something really special that you guys could make using the context that humans already put into Zed. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah.
Ramble.
I haven't heard of this one in particular. I was playing around with, I think, a newer one that was like around Twitter the last month, I think, called Conductor. I think
I've been using that one as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
That's cool.
That's specifically for Claude, if I'm not mistaken. Do they allow you to?
I think Conductor is just Claude. Vibe Kanban is like way more basic. It's just an NPX script that when you run it, it opens a browser, and it has a Kanban board, and you can flick between Claude, AMP, open code. It's just a Kanban board. Like I feel like Conductor feels much more polished. It feels like, but it's chat interface, right? It's a different style.
I think that their take, as far as I've seen, is just really abstracting you away from the code. Way more than like you would have in an editor. I also saw, I think, I don't know, like one site that, you would write a prompt, then that side will like send the same prompt to all of the providers at the same time. So that's kind of like
that was God mode, wasn't it? I saw that one.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool. one flavor of parallelization that you could have. But I do feel like, broadly speaking, I do feel like this is one of the next frontiers, right? So like, and people moved on very quickly from like the one agent paradigm to like multiple agents.
I feel like you guys, you're very well positioned for that with the collaboration that you have already in Zed. How set up is Zed for like multiple work trees open in the same editor? Is that even possible? Would that be a massive rework? Or do you, if you don't know, that's like also chill. It's a silly question.
No, it depends on like how big you're thinking. We can definitely do multiple Git work trees. We can do all of that. But like when it comes to smoothly plugging that into like agents, and even like multiple agents that are not necessarily coming from the same source, that is like infrastructure that's still out there to be built. But I do feel like also just from a more like maybe less technical standpoint and more really like concrete down to earth standpoint, I haven't really seen people, productively using these capacities like in a real setting. Like how many people are actually I think, for example, to circle back to Solomon's demo of container use, like he was talking about, the landing page building example, right? So like, say you're just starting a project, you don't know like what the visual direction you want to have for that project. That's a very like concrete and possible use case. Like you just ask, multiple agents to develop a certain landing page in multiple different styles, and they'll output those landing pages in like different links, and then you can look at them. that is one use case that I think it's more feasible than others, where like, you know, maybe you're working on a project, one single project, and then you want to like chop that up into multiple pieces and you want to parallelize at that level. I think it gets confusing, and and I think the next frontier of like tools is the one that will allow you to manage all of these things happening at the same time and make sure that they're like doing it the best way possible, following whatever guidelines you think need to be like followed. But anyway, I don't think like no one has like still cracked that deeply yet.
I'm definitely with you with the parallelizing thing. It's exhausting. It's like actually exhausting. The way I've found to get around it a little bit is so I only have 2 workflows that work, and I haven't managed to get any of the ones that you've just said to work. And those 2 are queuing tasks that can be one-shotted in Cursor. And you can queue like 10 tasks if you can just type fast enough before you've finished, before the other ones have finished working. And if you know they can all be one-shotted, then that works really, really well. And then the other one I've found works is like asynchronous. So creating like a bigger task that then gets done. I use Claude Code in GitHub. But I'm just wondering how that user experience would feel like in an editor. Like, would that even be possible in an editor? Is the editor the right place to have that asynchronous task? Or do you think of an editor as like a very synchronous place?
I think that's the next frontier question, man, honestly, because people are all like debating what is the role of the editor in this world, right? Like, you know, some of these apps that we were talking about, like Conductor or some other, like they are abstracting away the code entirely. Some other, even Cursor, like Cursor, I saw that they were doing like a non-editor mode, like the same way that you can like pick, you know, appearances on your like OS, like in macOS,
the background
for
agent.
example.
Or no, it's not the background agent. You're right. It's the chat mode. Yeah, I'm not sure they shipped that. I think that might have just been a skip from. They have their designer is very active on Twitter, right? His name is Rio, maybe.
Rio, yeah. Yeah, I think he was mentioned like he was posting things toward this direction. And I think that is the question that we're trying to figure out at Zed as well, right? Like we're building an editor, like maybe a little bit more than half of the company is working on the editor primitive. So like we just launched a debugger. People are still like working on language servers. We're still like interested in making, for example, we're still interested in making Python a great experience. So like all of these very editor-y problems. But then you do have this track and this like, you know, cloud of questions flowing around of like, what is the role of this software as a whole? Like, will people be actually writing code? I think realistically, my personal belief, which I don't know, like kind of naturally matches with what Zed is thinking, is that yes, like code would never really lose its role and its place. I think it will change depending on the task, as we were talking about. Like if it's something that you have a clear vision for, maybe you're a little bit more in a reviewing mode rather than like a writing, actually building mode. And then the editor should like be able to change to, you know, make you more comfortable with that. But for example, I think it's very hard for someone to build a piece of software like Zed totally like shooting prompts off, right? So like you need to have, you know, an architectural vision and you need to know how to execute that. And even, so, I mean, I think we're still like ways off from like replacing that entirely.
Yeah.
We don't know. I think maybe in 10 years, I don't know, but right now.
The reviewing process speaks to me actually, because a lot of the time, so I have Zed and Cursor next to each other on my bottom bar. And a lot of the time I open Cursor when I want to write stuff, because I have a very good like Claude Code setup, or at least I think it's nice. Like it feels nice. It's 50-50 split between code and Claude Code. And then Claude Code, I can toggle between different terminal windows. It just feels really like comfortable for me. But then when I want to read code and review code a lot of the time, I do open Zed because it's just so beautiful. And that like experience, the fonts, just everything, like that experience of reading code in Zed is a lot nicer than reading code in VS Code. And so I guess what I'm asking for is please make the beautiful reviewing experience, because That would be really nice. And like, just a very clean. I mean, we had Lou on from TLDraw. They're an infinite whiteboard company. Maybe you know them. And Lou has been posting a bunch of things on Twitter about what like future reviewing UIs might look like. And I'm finding this fascinating. Yeah. So that's my feature request if I get one.
Yeah. By the way, like TLDR, like in this SF conference that Wilhelm and I were, I think like 2 months ago, Steve was there. And I was like, man, I would love to have like a Canvas-like experience in Zed, maybe integrating TLDR. I don't know, like who knows? But I think, coming from this like more design standpoint, one thing that I just started to do, like, I don't know, maybe in the last month and a half or so, is doing just more like UI annotation. So like previously I would just, refer to code by like, so one thing that I've been doing a lot when I'm doing like this React prototype, I've been like adding IDs to divs just so like I can refer to them by name. Like, oh, the div with like tool call container is not working, blah, 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 blah. And then, for the last month or something, I've been doing that and attaching an image. And then, because like, I remember Steve mentioning that a whole lot. He was like, man, in TLDraw, if you like take a screenshot, write like a dumb annotation, like with, fat markers on the screenshot and send that off to the LLM, that works like awesome.
Yeah, I do that with Figma actually. So if you copy a bunch of components in Figma, you can copy them as a PNG, and then just below that is copy as code. So you can copy the CSS and the PNG, and then just paste both of them into Cursor and be like, you see the problem.
Yep. Yeah. There's one thing that I recently learned that Figma is doing, by the way, which is pretty interesting. And it is serving as like food for thought for us over in Zed, is like they recently launched a feature called annotations. So previously Figma would only have like comments, right? But comments were, I think, for the most part, being used to like debate around a certain part of the UI, right?
Yeah.
So like, oh, I don't know, like reduce this text size a little bit, or change the UI a little bit. Whereas annotations a little bit more of like technical notes if a developer is like skimming through your UI and you maybe like want to let them know how something is supposed to work and whatever. So Figma launched that. And if you use the Figma MCP server, the MCP server is going through these annotations to like consume the UIs and like use that as context.
Okay,
well, that's fascinating.
I have a confession to make. It's like a builder whose house is falling down. I am actually terrible at deciding to use MCP servers for the tools that I use. So I've been using Figma a lot in the last month, and I haven't set up their MCP server yet. So that is on me. I need to sort that out. That sounds very exciting. Yeah,
and you say it's an inspiration inside Zed as well. What are you thinking there?
I mean, I think a big next frontier for Zed is really like, figuring out how, I don't even know how all of these things will play out in reality, but ever since I joined, like we talk about it and we dream about this world where like we'll leave breadcrumbs of knowledge around the code base that are a little bit more than maybe like comments or, because there are so many things that are generated in the process of coming up with a certain function, with a certain like crate, whatever it is. And right now you need to give a little bit more of these, you need to be a little bit more proactive in giving these pieces of context to an AI if you want to like change either drastically or just like incrementally something. And Zed has all of this like infrastructure based on CRDTs and whatever, like these complex and mature pieces of technology. So there's certainly something that we could do to like leave more information and more context and like integrate that better with AIs.
No, that's super cool. I've always, this has been an interest of mine for ages. This idea that there's like, code is this like two-dimensional thing. And then like, there's this third dimension of stuff that sits behind it, right? So you have the breadcrumbs maybe that are like human knowledge. You have like LSP, like diagnostics or whatever, or just not even like information about like what sits behind the like function definition. Then you have the stuff which is particularly for me, which is all this runtime data. Like what are examples of how this code is like actually used? So it feels like there's this whole additional like dimensionality to it with context that is like really, really relevant or could be very relevant to LLMs. I think the question then ends up becoming like, do you like, there's all these problems that you run into, like context rot, and like how do you select what is the most relevant, or like, LLMs have seen like petabytes of just raw code from GitHub, but they haven't seen like the third dimension. So like, how do you tell them about the third dimension in like an effective way? But it feels like for sure there's like so much more to be explored there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like realistically speaking, one of the things that I've been realizing in terms of using agents is that like, for example, a year and a half ago when we were really starting with this like agent panel revamp that we eventually launched like in May, we were talking about like context inference and like, code base retrieval and, all of these more complex ways to analyze and learn about a code base. And that has certainly changed a lot with like tool calls. Agents can like skim through, but despite of that, I still feel like there is a good chunk of like how well you craft the context, how well you present that to the LLM.
100%. Yeah.
So I think that there is a track of people talking about like making everything automatic. Like you just send off the most dumb and shallow prompt to the AI. And at some point, the AI
There's
will
got
be
to be
good.
skill somewhere.
There's got to be like, you need to have like some careful way of using this. Like it's either like, what to send and how to describe and how specific you need to be. So this is like part of me. I think I'm kind of like divided in half because I do feel like everything is changing because of AI. Like the role of the engineer, the role of the designer, all these things are changing. Even like things such as how big your team needs to be and stuff like that. These are all changing because you can just like period, do more because of AI. But in terms of like how well and how like, I think, I don't know where I saw this, but I saw somewhere people saying that like AI is really good if you want code to last like, 5 or 10 years, AI is good to like some extent. That will still like take deep human thinking. But like if you want code that can work now and you may like rewrite it in, I don't know, next week or in a month or something,
Right.
AI is great for that because it's doing way less holistic production of code, if that makes sense. So
Definitely.
But this actually reminds me, I have yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so much incredible discourse at the moment about like AI is great, AI is not great, or like there's, I think especially in the past month, there were so many good blog posts. There's like 6 weeks with Claude Code. There was, I think there was one that I feel like I saw via Z, or maybe the Z account retweeted or something, that was like, after months of using LLMs, I'm going back to using my brain, or, so lots of great discourse about it. I was speaking to a friend recently who discovered Cursor like a month ago, and he's actually giving me shit for not telling him about Cursor earlier.
Yeah, you're mean, dude. Like, you started a bloody podcast to talk about Cursor and Claude Code. You at least could have told your friends.
He's accusing me of gatekeeping, but he said it's like the best thing that's happened to him all year. It's discovering Cursor.
That's so funny.
And he, I tried to quiz him a bunch about like why would he's doing work so well for him, or like because he doesn't have an engineering background at all. We've joked for years that he's a full stack no coder. But so I'm like, how do you get so much use out of it? Like, because I think one of these blog posts, right, it described someone using AI, like full vibe coding, like not looking at the code. And then at some point it started falling apart, and he actually started looking into like what was going on. And he found like, oh yeah, there's like 2 files with almost the same name with like the same logic. And like, obviously the AI is getting confused between like which one is actually getting used. And I asked my friend, like, so how do you run into these issues? Like what are the issues that you're having? And it turns out that his architecture, I think, is actually really, really smart. So he uses Bubble, which is like a no code tool. And in there, like that essentially is like his models, his tables, his like core business logic. And that is like not code that any AI gets to touch, right? That is just like all like no code, like UI defined stuff, which I think is very interesting because like I think for most of these like web CRUD apps, like the database really is at the core, right? Like your models and like your storage really like needs to be like rock solid. And through this like no code system it is. And then what he does the vibe coding for, he has essentially like dozens and dozens of like cloud functions. And they're all somewhat self-contained. So he describes it as like a kind of a hub and spoke model. So you have like the core hub, which like doesn't get touched by AI. And then you have all of these spokes, all these like random cloud functions, which can be as messy as they want to be. Like, you know, if the AI adds a bunch of logic that never gets used, it doesn't really affect the rest of the system at all. It doesn't really tear down like the middle part. So I thought that was a really, really interesting architecture where he can like move super fast, sling all these like cloud functions, test them all out, add tons of features. But like the core is like very solid and like hard to like fuck up basically.
I'm gonna have to jump, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. You guys feel free to keep chatting, but I'm in the granola office and they're about to have a meetup, cool. So it's about to get very, very loud. I can see awesome. People walking in.
Yeah, Danilo, thanks so much for coming on. Yeah, great to chat, and always love the vibe you bring. It's an honor.
Yeah, man. Miss having you around every day. It's been awesome when you were, or it was super awesome, and super glad to have the opportunity, guys. Super cool.
Thanks, dude. I still can't believe it's your first podcast. You should come on more, man. You have got the vibe. You're so there.
Talk too much.
No. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Anyway, catch you in a bit.
All right, guys. Peace out. See you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.